big part of my brand is kind of developing and empowering Latinos to,
Mhm.
take positions of power and influence. And we have so much to offer. Certainly it's a development journey.
Hi, and welcome back to the Latina Leadership Series. I am your host. My name is Angelica Casares. And on today's episode, I have Esther Aguilera. Esther, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your very busy day. I know I understand you're a very busy woman. I asked my husband to please set this interview up because I definitely wanted to talk to you. I know your organization, I know what you do, but I want to talk about you first. So if we can just quickly dive into, not quickly, if we can dive into who you are, how you started your career. Where do you come from? ¿Quién eres?
Happy to be here with you, Angelica. Thank you for inviting me. You know, I have worked with the nation's top leaders, from members of Congress, cabinet members, most recognized nonprofit leaders, as well as, corporate CEOs and corporate directors. But, my path is not, it's not something that I ever in my wildest dreams would have imagined being here. I am an immigrant from Mexico. My family moved to California when I was 4 years old. And we were undocumented when we first came in, even though my dad's mom was an American citizen. It took a while to adjust our status. So I'm the daughter of a landscape laborer and a
Mhm,
garment worker. And
mhm,
growing up, there were six of us. And so, my parents, they didn't have a college education. We didn't talk about, you know, the politics or the markets and business at our kitchen table. It was, making ends meet. And, but we saw and knew that through education, that's a pathway for opening up opportunities. And you really don't know what you don't know, right? You're just kind of following great advice. I had, great teachers and great mentors along the way. And for me, I kind of found, a calling. I was, in elementary, but also again in college, every time I learned about who's leading the country, who are elected officials, who are business leaders, I never saw anyone that looked like me or that really understood my story. And so that kind of led to some curiosity, and led me to study public policy in college.
mm.
And that helped me land my first job in Washington, D.C. It was not a place that I was thinking of ever moving to, but an opportunity opened up to move here in 1990. So it's
Mhm.
been 32 years, and happy to dive in some more. But that's a little snapshot on that trajectory. I'm happy to do a deeper
Yeah.
dive on any part of it.
So I have a question. You said you and your parents immigrated here. Where did you guys land?
I grew up in Southern California.
Southern California. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So Southern California, uh, he was a skilled worker, but you, I guess, outside of the skilled work community, did you understand like the difference between you and the others when you were in Southern California? There was like I know there's a divide and there has been a divide, but did you know that there was a difference between you and other people, or when did you know that you were kind of sort of different, or did you always know?
Well, I mean, I think first I was four, so at that
Yeah,
age you're still kind of forming
yeah,
these different ideas. But I will say that the community I grew up in San Fernando was majority Latino,
okay.
yet at the same time majority Mexican American, blue collar.
Hmm.
But at the same time, the interesting thing is that in sometimes in our own communities, I remember in elementary school having you know other Latino Latinas say, well, anyone who speaks Spanish means that they're a wetback.
Hmm.
That was a term used then, probably still used today. And so
Yes.
I found that it was very interesting that you don't kind of experience the otherness. Not you certainly
Hmm.
experience the otherness in other communities, but sometimes in our own community, we sometimes face that too.
So the reason I asked this is it's because we're made aware of who we are very quickly, and it's only through the outside verse, right? And that tends to affect us as we lead our careers, as we lead our lives. So you're interested in basically what happens in politics, what happens in your surrounding cities, and who's in office and why they believe the way they do. So you take quite some interest in it to the point where you actually traject your career in that space.
Yeah.
It's sometimes we meet adversity in those spaces. Do you feel like you met any adversities?
Well, I mean, I think to your earlier conversation in terms of, how we identify, the other big part is women, is Latinas, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's the other thing that it bothered me a lot how women were portrayed, and whether it's watching the telenovelas or mainstream media, or especially Spanish movies,
Mm-hmm.
that was something else that for me triggered, like, well, why is it that way? I would ask myself questions. So that's kind of, I think, the other there is the cultural identity influence, and then there's certainly being a woman. I'm sure a lot of
Mm-hmm.
us have faced that. When I moved to Washington, D.C., my first job was with the what was the National Council of La Raza at the time, which is today known as Unidos US. And it was a great training ground to do a lot of
Mm-hmm.
research and policy analysis, and get my writing really up to speed in terms of how you make a case using data. And from
Mm-hmm.
there, I went to work on Capitol Hill. I was fortunate that I have built my career leading organizations from my mid 20s in the Latino space. So I think that kind of brought its benefits, and also a lot of great learning experiences. So I was with our community leaders, but at the same time really was at the forefront of how much disparity there is for Latinos in the U.S., and that has been one of the major reasons why what drives me is kind of making it possible for more Latino and Latinas to make it, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's been driven me. I think it was certainly college, like for
Mm-hmm.
many of us, was a pivot point,
Mm-hmm.
because it was a small private liberal arts school in California, and I felt very self-conscious about my accent and so many different things that I felt like the odd one out. But it was a very welcoming community, and it I always say that when you put yourself in new or challenging roles, or things that are where you might be outside of your comfort level, I think that's where we grow the most. We're
Yeah.
we're yeah, we're sponges. We absorb, we adapt, and I think that's a great quality for Latinas and Latinos.
To have. Yeah, definitely. I agree. I for sure agree. So to stay on that topic very quickly, there's been a lot of conversation, and I think you know this, and I think you're expert in this, and I think I definitely, because you're the expert and and you've been in this space for quite some time. There's been a lot of conversation around Latinas lately. I've seen it. I've heard like the outside in, leading the space in entrepreneurship, going into colleges in droves, and a lot of them dropping out within the first 2 years, not really making it through. But lately, there's always been like a first, right? These articles that I read, the first Latina ever to have this seat, the first Latina to ever have. Do you feel like you were ever in the space where you were the only woman? Like the only woman like taking up space in that realm or in that world, or in whether it was board meetings, or like one of few women, and then on top of that you were like the only Latina. Do you feel like that there's a shift happening finally?
Well, I do think that we are starting to see a shift. Is it fast enough for Latinas? No.
Mm-mm.
I served on other large association boards where I was the only Latina. Maybe there's one other person of color. And it was an environment that was welcoming, but they really, it's hard to kind of, when, the demographics of the country are changing, when, Latinos, we add 82% of new entrants to the workforce, and trying to tell the association space or other spaces that, if you want to remain relevant in the future, you need to have more diverse members, and need to, think about this, from a business and a future stake perspective. But I don't, sometimes, while they will nod and say yes, oftentimes the real underlying work that it takes to really, you know, bring not only an important cohort, but one that adds and brings so much new value. So I saw it there. I have what's as I got started on Capitol Hill, I was executive director of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. So I was working on every
Mm-hmm.
legislative issue under the sun. It was,
Mm-hmm.
everything from education, immigration, telecommunications, and we would form, coalitions. We would work on legislation that is going through the committees to try and impact it and make it more friendly and more accommodating, make sure Latinos are, not, there aren't barriers that would keep from some inclusion and equitable participation. So it
Mm-hmm.
was, I was in my late 20s, and since that time, I've had leadership roles in different sectors and different areas. But that was certainly a pivotal time that opened up, my eyes to many other things, including,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's where my drive for big part of my brand is kind of developing and empowering Latinos to,
Mm-hmm.
take positions of power and influence. And we have so much to offer. Certainly it's it's a development journey, but we need to, you know, position ourselves and not be shy about trying to ensure that our names are in the hat
Mm-hmm.
for senior roles, certainly for leadership roles. And today I
Mm-hmm.
work on diversifying the corporate boardrooms. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think I keep telling everybody this. I've been telling everyone for the last year, anybody who will listen. Keep telling them women are leading conversations, and you're missing a big opportunity if you're not listening to Latinas specifically. I think we're taking up space. I think it was not that it was time. I think we've always been trying to take up space. I think just I guess the camera has finally like panned towards Latinas a little bit, and what we're doing in different sectors and sections, and why we are leading in our entrepreneurship spaces, and why we're talking about the digital divide, and why we're talking about certain topics, and why we're leading those conversations. And I think you're missing an opportunity if you're not listening in and you're not tuning in what kind of conversations Latinas are having day to day, especially, and overall, like what affects our community. But so
yeah.
I want to take it back, Esther, with you really quick. So you're raised in Southern California. Can you tell me what was like a skill, or what was something that you learned from, say, your father or mother, that you kind of sort of carried into your career now? We're big on family, and sometimes we take to heart what our relatives and what our, especially our mother and our father, say to us. And we kind of carry it through. Is there anything special that your mother or father did, or a specific event that maybe you thought to yourself, "This is why I do what I do"?
Mhm. Well, I think a big piece is
Hmm.
resiliency, and resourcefulness. I mean, we found ways to, certainly support each other and, get by. And so you build all of this resilience and resourcefulness that I think has been pivotal to, my growth trajectory overall. And then it's, you know, finding some skill sets that are unique and that I thrive in, and then just, driving, building on those strengths. And as
Hmm.
you build new strengths, I think it comes from that, those early humble beginnings, still
Yeah,
very humble
definitely.
here, of resiliency and resourcefulness. Those are just a couple of them.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So you're in your position now. I have to ask, and I also read on you just a little bit. You come from that space of corporate. You carry that into what you do now. What specifically is it that you do in your position?
Sure. Well, I'm the CEO of the Latino Corporate Directors Association, and I it's an organization that was formed by Latino corporate directors.
Mhm.
Basically, they started coming together with the help of ASER, Hispanic Association of Corporate Responsibility, and the directors. Basically, there's too few Latinos on corporate boards, and yet, and the excuse is always we can't find them. And so, this
Mhm.
organization, what I love about it is it was formed with a real can-do um, platform in terms of, look, we need to be part of the solution, and we are part of the solution and a resource. So what is very unique is and I joined in mid 2016, and the
Mhm.
organization has increased tenfold just in the last 5-6 years.
I read you were the first full-time person that they hired and
Y-
Latina nonetheless.
right.
So
And
yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to add that
oh,
in there.
no worries. Absolutely, I'm very proud of that. um, so I came in to really build our strategic pillars and our framework, and all of to really build the organization. And that's what I love and do. When I came into this role, I had not only built other organizations and really brought a strategic approach into everything I did in past roles, that when I
Mhm.
came to lead this organization, I felt that much more confident that, one, it's a slightly different space, but I can do this. And I quickly, I'm just so, I look at a path, a growth path, but also some immediate sort of building blocks that we need today to grow.
Mhm.
So what is
Mhm.
unique about the organization, Angelica, is that this is the first time in the US that
Mhm.
we're bringing together Latinos at respect and accomplished leaders at the highest levels of corporate governance, corporate directors, and
Okay.
corporate leadership, as well as other sort of business leadership. Um, and this is, a group that has grown it has never existed. It's grown very large. It's national. Um, and we're focused on advancing Latinos for the boardroom.
Mhm.
But we we take a very comprehensive approach, because in
Okay.
doing that, you know, we have a three-part strategy.
So I have a question then. How does it look like? How does it look like I become part of the organization? I'm identified as a potential maybe leader or a board leader. And what does it look like for me as one of those who has been identified? How does this organization work for me? And how do you help me?
And that's a great question. So, the membership of the organization, part of our value statement is really a commitment to advancing Latinos, and to paying it forward in terms of bringing others along. A door was opened, you keep it open, and help bring others along. And so this is, so we focus on three pillars. One is
Mm.
growing the supply. And that means if we're going to increase the number of Latinos on boards, it can't just be the same people on the board. So we're actively, so if you are a new member, first, the membership, we look at individuals who, already are qualified, would bring a lot of value to the boardroom. But it starts with, um, we have a very comprehensive, it's our executive membership. So we have two membership categories:
Mhm.
executive members who are board aspiring, and then we
Okay.
have corporate director members who are on boards. And so that combination,
Mhm.
first, we work with the executives on a board readiness curriculum. I mean, again, they bring
Mhm.
the the skill set and knowledge, typically SVP, C-suite level executives. Um, and we really prepare them for what it means to be on a board, because it's
Mhm.
very different than an executive role.
Mhm.
Um, and that's got 4 components, and it's a year round. So there's corporate governance, insights, workshops, and that type of insight.
Mhm.
But what's unique about our approach is, by the way, you can go to a lot of great universities and others and get phenomenal sort of, board
Mhm.
governance workshops. But the difference is, when you do those, you're kind of, spend a lot of money, and um, you do the course, and then you're on your own. So what's
Mhm.
different here is that we do that, but then you're also a member of a larger community and cohort that is, there to support you on your journey to the boardroom, not just, for that course. So that's why we have the coursework. We work on positioning you with a board bio. A bio is very different, and creating your value proposition, practicing. And the
Mhm.
third thing is, there's a lot of coaching involved along the way. Our experienced directors are there as coaches in different stages of the journey, and
Mhm.
help also refine the pitch and how you can have really smart conversations. I think we really do more. They're not trainings; they're really practical how-to
Mhm.
sessions around. This is first, you want to let people know in your network that, who are on boards. You have to
Mhm.
have a, you know, build that strong network, and you want to have a conversation about, hey, I'm interested in a board for this reason. This is what I would bring. But then you would also want to have like a smart conversation to say, you know, right now boards are dealing with X, Y, and Z. What are you seeing in the boardroom, so that you're having a conversation, you're having, we do cover kind of the latest trends in terms of board governance and all the risk, and what boards and companies are facing today. That's part of our overall, organization programming. Um, but you want that individual to remember you. If this is somebody who's on a board, they typically get calls from headhunters and others saying, hey, I'm looking for someone with,
Mhm.
this skill set and that skill set. So you want to be top of mind. You want to practice it. You want to be, have some of these tools in your toolkit. So we have those toolkits for them. And then we do the practicing. There's also mock boardroom practices. After
Mhm.
you do the governance, you're kind of sitting in that seat. And so we do that kind of training. There's also mock interviews. We work with all the major search firms, and they
Mhm.
spend and donate their time to do some mock interviews after you've developed your value proposition, your pitch, and you looked at your board bio. Then you're ready for, testing it out. And this is a very friendly environment. No one's perfect. It's not, people aren't expecting super everything to be polished, but it's where you're here to learn in a safe environment. So that, that's a big part of it. There's another part
Mhm.
of work that we do. I'll take a break so if you have questions on that. But that's only half of the whole story. Angelica, what is also unique about LCDA is that it is a network and ecosystem of Latino CEOs, corporate directors, and senior executives and C-suite leaders, either again on a board or primed and aspiring to a boardroom. But we also work with all major search firms,
Mhm.
um, from Spencer Stewart, Korn Ferry, Russell Reynolds, Egon Zehnder, Heidrick & Struggles. They're all our partners and members, and all the private equity. We work with Blackstone, Carlyle, TPG, because they influence the boards of the their portfolio companies.
Mhm.
And so we work. We supported this year. We're supporting about 300 different board searches. So the other part of
Oh,
the equation
amazing.
here, yes, is that we are the go-to resource to help source candidates. And that's why there is, on our website,
Mhm.
an interest form and, for the different membership categories. And there is a review process.
Okay.
It's because our sweet spot is, again, those individuals who are close already now with what boards look for, and
Mhm.
that's who we work with. And so that's to say that the ecosystem is already ready made, and then you have the directors who coach and mentor, the executives along the way. So I think that's what's really powerful and unique about this, and why it matters,
Mhm.
because again, we take that comprehensive approach. So we focus on the supply, and on the demand side, it is working with all those individuals, because it's when Latinos are sought after. One, first, from the skill set, you have to have a deep skill set that you bring to
Mhm.
add value to that boardroom, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
right, and then you bring, other diverse qualities to really ask smart questions from different
Mhm.
perspectives and vantage points. Because a board, it's you'll hear this often. It's your head is in, but your fingers are out. You're not management. In fact, there's legal reasons why management has to do their job, but it's the board's job to really be super inquisitive, and there's an art form to that as well.
So, you guys it's a pretty young organization, but how do you feel it's moving for the next couple of years? Are you guys going to be doing the same? Will will this organization continue to do the same work, or will it shift a little bit? Do you see the need is separating maybe a little bit, and you guys are navigating it differently? I know you mentioned coaching. Are you developing leaders? Are you will there be a cohort for that, like those who are like younger, maybe potential leaders, and to be able to take those boardroom seats? Is Are y'all navigating a little bit differently these last 4 years, these last couple of years? Sorry.
Sure. No, great question. So again, we had our first annual convening October
Mhm.
2016. So technically it's only been 6 years, and the first years were really formative. So
Mhm.
we're really just our sweet spot is that that kind of SVP, C-suite, and
Mhm.
director level. I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of other organizations. I think sometimes what happens if you get too dispersed
Mhm.
too early,
Mm.
then
Mhm.
you don't have the
Mhm.
impact that you're looking for. And there
Mhm.
are other organizations that are really focused on, the mid-career. You have
Yeah.
Alpha, as I said, and others. And I think this space is something that really didn't have as much of the attention.
Mhm.
Um, but I have to say that, look, our numbers are on board. Latinos are the least tapped, and Latinas, the
Mhm.
numbers are woeful in the C-suite and the boardroom.
Mhm.
There's only in the Fortune 500, a little more than 1% of
Yeah.
Latinas on the board seats, which is really unacceptable. And really, to change that, it's been a deep dive. This
Mhm.
is about changing perceptions. This is about changing the narrative, because the narrative has been about scarcity, not finding Latinos. And we have now the best pulse on Latino talent. We know where all of the current and retired C-suite leaders are, and others that bring, the profiles the boards, look for. Again, we
Yeah.
work on a lot of these searches, so we know what they're
Mhm.
asking for.
Yeah.
And, it's only fair to set up people for success, right? But for
Yeah.
folks that are
Absolutely.
interested, I would just say, look, continue to focus on your career, build
Mhm.
that expertise, or an enterprise-wide strategic role, because they just don't look for a particular functional expertise. It's also
Mhm.
what you can bring in terms of a vantage point, whether it's global or, again, enterprise-wide
Mhm.
strategy, and that kind of broader perspective, or a large P&L, certainly C-suite and others. There's just so much at stake today, as you know, in business,
Mhm.
especially in public and large private companies, that the boards take a lot of thought into what the skill set is around that table.
Absolutely. Mhm.
And so again, we just want to make sure that there's no excuses. There's plenty of
Mhm.
talent, and Latinos are smart. You know, it's we're 2 in 10 Americans. We're driving consumption and consumer growth, and there's a huge business advantage for Latinos in the boardroom.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking that. Before we leave, I think one of the things that I do want to say on here is this, um, that because the way that it has been set up to become part of a board member, I think sometimes we need to relook at that, at those skill sets. We need to um, they were made for a reason in a way to dialect into a certain group, and I think sometimes we try to fit into that, and then we miss opportunities knowing that there's other skill sets on that opportunity on that end. I am
Well, what's
as
happening
as
in
you
that
yeah,
Sure. What's happening
yeah,
in that space is, look, in the past, it was COOs,
hmm,
CFOs, and CEOs who were 90% of those board seats. It's opening up a little
yeah,
bit more. What we're finding
yeah,
with our data is that about 50% of new Latinos, of those appointed to board seats, half
hmm,
are new directors, they're first-time directors.
hmm,
The aperture is changing a little bit wider,
hmm,
but it's still like a C-suite leader, a C-suite, or an SVP, maybe a
hmm.
technologist in some areas. The aperture is growing somewhat, but it's still very, very competitive.
It is.
One of
It
our
is.
members put it this way: it's harder to get on a board than it is to Harvard. So the best thing is, look, make sure that you're continuing to thrive, continuing to really build your,
Mhm.
super, that secret sauce, what makes you stand out and bring value
Yeah.
in the boardroom. This is one last insight. Oftentimes what a board will do is say, is this a person who is this a skill set that we can hire, or is this something
Mhm,
that is strategic or new that's in our skill in the skills matrix that we need? And so,
mhm.
by the way, this is a smart thing to do too. Take a look at the proxy statements every company has to file, and this is public, and
Okay.
it'll list this is person was brought on for this skill set or that skill set, and that will give you insight as to what is.
Okay. That's I like what you said at the beginning. Keep at your secret sauce that you know that you're going to bring to that skill set, that you're definitely going to it's going to be your advantage point. And if this is you're going to be like your trajectory of your career.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that, Esther. I'm definitely going to take that away. I think that's going to be my quote for my podcast on this one. Pero
It's
thank you so
it's
much
your value proposition, absolutely.
a value proposition. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me out of your busy day today. Este, so if I could find you, if I could find here, if I could find maybe you specifically or your organization, where can we find you?
Well, definitely I'm on LinkedIn,
Okay.
and our website, latinocorporatedirectors.org.
Okay. Awesome. Again, thank you mucho, for coming on the podcast and talking to me today.